It's podcast day. It's podcast day. Welcome in, friends. Hello and welcome to the heyBrownBerry YouTube channel. My name is Marcelin and I'm happy that you've joined me for another podcast episode. This is part 2 in a 2-part project vlog about some handspun socks. I made these handspun socks and shared in the previous episode how I created the yarn. This episode will be all about the knitting and finishing of that sock project. I'm so glad you're here. So let's dive right in. Friends, I'm re-recording this segment because I recorded it once before and wanted to sit in the living room, but Drew was making a salad and it sounded like construction work. I guess it was construction work. He was constructing himself a salad with a lot of loud chopping. So here we go, take 2, catching you up on the progress of my handspun sock project. So it's the handspun has been finished for a few days now, and I cast on sock number 1, which is very exciting because now I get to see if this vision comes together the way I hoped. I split my yarn cakes. That was step 1. So I split my handspun yarn and the Middlebrook Fiberworks vintage yarn into 2 equal cakes. I actually took time to record the yardage on the handspun. I have the landline that never rings, only rings because I pressed record on the camera, right? So I measured the yardage on my handspun using my electric Eeel wheel yardage counter. Is that right? I'll put in a video of me counting yardage using this tool. I really could get up and go look at it and tell you exactly what it's called, but instead I'll just show it to you, and I'll put the information about it in the description box below. It came up to 181.5 yards of this yarn, and I measured it at about between 10 and 12 wraps per inch throughout the skein. There were definitely some obvious differences in thickness, but that's fine. It came out to close to 200 yards. And then I have, if I remember this right, I've got less than 50 grams of the Middlebrook Fiberworks, but that's okay. I'm really doing this in a method that I think will allow me to use up all of this yarn, the handspun. And if I have a little bit left over of the Middlebrook, I am totally okay with that. I have other Middlebrook Fiberworks yarns that this can complement, or it can be used again for sock, toes, or cuffs. So I cast on, as I said. I got started. Here's a look. I already love it. I actually loved it from the toe and the first 2 stripes of handspun. I was already in love with it. I decided to work toe up so that I know I can keep knitting until the handspun yarn is done. And also, I love that method. It's the method that I design my sock patterns using. Of course, I am all for cuff down as well. If that's what you prefer, it's always good. But in this case, I am thinking about yarn usage, so I know that I will keep going until my handspun is finished. I started out with 14 stitches for the toe, so I should say 28 stitches for the toe. I cast on using a Turkish cast on, and 28 total stitches plus some rapid increasing gives me this rounded toe that I enjoy. It's more boxy and less pointy. So after increasing for the toe, initially I went all the way up to 56 stitches. I kept knitting, and started trying on the sock. I tried it on my foot, and I also tried it on my hand. The widest part of my hand is almost equivalent to the widest part of my foot, so sometimes I try on socks using my hands just to get an idea of how much positive or negative ease I'm working with. So just like on my foot, here on my hand, you can see that there is definitely some wiggle room. I typically prefer my socks with more negative ease, so a bit tighter than this, but I'm actually okay with how cozy and thick this sock is turning out to be, and I'm also okay with the amount of ease that's in there right now. So I'm going to keep going. I should say, correcting myself, I did go up to 56 stitches, realized that was too big. That was way more room than I wanted. So I ripped the sock back out just down to the beginning of the knit plane. So after the toe increases were finished, I ripped back a few of those increases, and then I settled on 48 stitches. So the body of the sock right now, most of which is being done in the Handspun, is on 48 stitches around. For the heel of this sock, I've decided to use a German short row heel. I don't typically knit short row heels on my socks, at least I didn't in the past, because I found that the standard short row heel technique was too shallow and too tight for my feet. I have very flat feet, and most people have trouble with tightness over the instep, so the top part of the foot. I have trouble with the fact that my feet are so flat and I have no arch, that right around the beginning of my ankle area is kind of the broadest part of my foot. It needs a deep gusset or a deeper heel pocket to hold that section. So standard short row heels did not provide that with the numbers. As I started designing socks, I started accounting for that in my sock design so that I could adjust for my fit. If you've been here long enough, you know I'm all about the knit to fit and making adjustments so that things fit you properly, including your socks. So I love a good technique for adjusting for fit, and Mina Phillip, who owns Knitting Expat Designs, has created a simple sock pattern. And I say simple because the socks themselves are demonstrated in stockinette in the round, with layers and layers of options for making a short row heel. So the pattern includes cuff down and toe up instructions. It includes German short row heel instructions, and it has what Mina has coined the mini heel flap adjustment. So she actually has come up with a very clever technique for introducing a bit of a heel flap and therefore a bit of a gusset into a short row heel construction. I highly recommend this pattern. I've linked it in the description box below, and that's what I'll be using for my Handspun socks. I did decide to go with straight up stockinette in the round after all, no texture, no fancy anything, because I just was loving the way the different shades and tones in the Handspun were turning out, and I figure that's enough fun for me for one project. I'm going to keep going on this. It's got a beautiful stitch marker on it from my friend Denise. It's shiny so you won't be able to see, but it says, "Do more of what makes you happy." I couldn't agree more. That's what these socks are turning out to be for me. I'm actually looking forward to pulling these on when the weather cools down and it's a bit colder in the house. When the tile is cold, I'll put on these cozy socks. I'm hoping before I finish up this video, I'll be able to show you one of these most of the way done. I would definitely like to show you how I do the contrasting heel. In Mina's pattern, she actually includes options for the short row heel using a contrast yarn or just using the same yarn that you're using for the whole sock. Love how these two colors, how these two yarns actually are coming together. And I love how the Handspun is knitting up. I'll add that I'm using a US 3, which is a 3.25 millimeter needle. Certainly bigger than what I would use for fingering weight, but it's giving a very nice dense fabric. That's the kind of density I like in my fabric for my socks. I feel like that will wear very well. And because these are mill ends, I don't know the exact content, but I think there are enough fiber types in here that I should get some good wear out of these. The person who milled this yarn said that they thought there might even be some alpaca in here, some strength. I predict these will be pretty strong. I'm gonna wear them either way. What's the worst that could happen? I have to use my own mending techniques, which will be fine. Thanks for joining me on the progress so far. Hey friends, it's a knitting night. It's a knitting Friday night, so I'm just gonna share a few scenes of me working my way up to the point where I can start the heel on this. I have about an inch to go. I just did some measurements, and I'd like my heel cup to be about 2.5 inches, maybe a little more. So I still have another inch before I can even start that process. But I got my pattern printed out, at least the portion that helps me get through the mini heel flap adjustment, and then I'm gonna use my contrasting yarn for that portion. So I'm hoping to get through that in the next day or two. I have not been spending a lot of time on this sock. So much knitting can get done over a weekend of catching up on podcasts, and I'm binging a couple things on Netflix right now. Are you finding some really good companions to your making? If so, feel free to share them below. If there's a making worthy book series or TV series or something else that you like to enjoy while you're making, share it so that all of us can enjoy it maybe along with you. Hello my friends, I'm checking in with you on a sock project update. That's what this episode is all about. I have both of my Handspun socks on the go, and I just realized that I left one of them out there. Be right back. Okay, sock 2 has been rescued from another part of the house. Let me show you where we are with them. I am working them concurrently. So far so good. I have one sock that's being knit magic loop on a long circular, and one that is being knit with DPNs. I'm happy to say that hasn't affected my gauge. So I'm recording this on a Sunday. It's kind of an overcast, bit gloomy day, which matches my mood if I'm being honest. Probably you watch some podcasts that are, you know, pretty formulaic. You get about the same thing each time. I don't. I tend to really sink into the podcasts where I get a glimpse into that person as they go. And today is one of those like low energy, low mood days for me. I have had some struggles in the past with such things, and I feel like there are enough people in our creative community who can relate to that. Even when I'm very, very happy about my knitting projects, sometimes stress and fatigue and other things are also a part of what's happening while we're making. So I'm in a space like that right now. I don't mind sharing with you. And at the same time, I am feeling very grateful for a simple project that feels like it's progressing exactly the way I would want it to. I believe in a previous snippet I told you that I was working a heel using the mini heel flap adjustment, which is part of a simple sock pattern by Mina Phillip, which is anything but simple. It's an incredible reference. I've linked it below. And the heel is done on both socks. It's a German short row heel, and I'm a big fan of German short rows. I find them so much easier to track and identify and work than the standard wrap and turn short rows. I say I find it easier. It just fits my style more because the stitches that you work for a German short row are very easily identified. And just as I was working on these, after knitting for years and doing short row heels, I finally understood the first and second half of a heel kind of in a deeper way. Sometimes you can work a technique over and over again, and you know, on the strength of repeating it you get it. But there's this next level understanding of, oh, that's why this works. And I kind of reached that with this short row heel situation. I've even designed socks with short row heels and just kind of stuck to the numbers, and it comes out right. But I finally feel like I'm getting it. I understand why it works. Just sort of crazy thinking about how long into my experience before that came. Another technique that I am working on this sock currently, that's on the longer circular needle, is I am adding in. You can see this is how much yarn I had left for the hand spun portion of the sock. It's getting smaller, and I do intend to finish it, or get as close to finishing it as I can. And the sock past the heel is a few inches. I would love to go to about 6 inches. I like that height on a leg for my sock. So what I started to do is incorporate more of this Middlebrook Fiberworks yarn. This is the yarn that I had paired with it right from the toe. And I love how well they go together. And I'm going to show you an example of that. I have started to do helical knitting. Helical knitting is a process by which you can work single row stripes. It's used in a couple of ways. Helical knitting can be used for single row stripes of 2 different colors. And because our knitting is done in a spiral, each row is kind of building on top of the other in a spiral, helical knitting technique allows you to move the starting point of that new spiral so that the rows just sit on top of each other, and the junction between the 2 colors is invisible, really. It can also be used in the case of a hand-dyed yarn, where you don't want any kind of pooling or major differences between 2 skeins in a project. So you can use helical knitting to incorporate 2 skeins of the same yarn without having any obvious color shift because of different dye patterns from one skein to the other. It's genius. My friend Grace has a excellent technique. Tutorial, sorry. I think she even has a couple of videos on this, but I'll link below to the helical knitting tutorial by Grace of Babel's Traveling Yarns. And I had watched that so long ago and thought, this is cool. I'll probably use this at some point. I like single row stripes as a design element. Last night, I just was not up for going to search for the tutorial, and I thought, let me test myself and see if I can remember what I watched and how to do it. And I did, and I was so excited because it's working. These 2 yarns, as you can see, have some very similar tones and shades in them. Nicely complementary to each other. And so for single row stripes, what I was going after was just a very smooth transition between the 2 colors. So I'm going to point out the section so you can see exactly where I've started to do about 6 or 7 single row stripes. It almost looks like it's just a continuation of the handspun yarn, which is just what I wanted. So I will be able to use these 2 small bits of both of the yarns and continue up the leg. That's the plan, is to just keep going single row stripes, and that means I will have enough yarn for the length that I want. I'm having trouble getting my words out today. And even if I have more than I need, I may just make a longer sock, or leave some little leftovers from here. I also found in my youngest daughter's room this tiniest ball of yarn from a project that she had crocheted. It was just on the floor in her room, a little leftover. This deep, deep burgundy. As you can see, that's just a tiny bit, but it is going to be the top edge of my sock cuff. That's the plan, because I think this color blends so well. Nope, that's not true. I think this color stands out so well against these earthier shades. And that pop of color on the rim, on the cuff edge of a sock, I think is so cute. Hopefully this will be just enough to do that for both socks. it's not this red, which would be way more contrast than I actually want, but if I get it finished and show you the photos, I'll try to adjust the color so that it's more accurate. How is your sock making going? We're full on into Socktober, and that means my Instagram feed is full of sock projects. I don't mind that. I love to see the combinations of yarns and colors and textures and how people are digging into their stash for autumn themed shades. It's just so nice to see something that, you know, you can participate in within the community. Let me know how things are going if you're sock knitting or not. I love to hear the progress on your projects. I'll be back when I have a little bit more progress on mine. Just pop back in to say I'm pretty happy with how this looks so far, and I forgot to mention that I have tried these on. The fit is great. I'm very excited about it. I think once I soak these and block them, they're going to relax a little bit, which will be fine. I have enough negative ease in here to account for that. But yeah, so far so good. Good morning. I'm outside so that I can wrap up this episode about these gorgeous socks. You may hear a bit of background noise because it's the weekend and a lot of people are doing yard work and so on, but I'm so happy to share these with you in their finished state. I am very pleased with how these turned out, and I appreciate you joining me for all the process details. These are so woolly and cozy. I've already tried them on, and I'm actually going to take them with me on my upcoming travel, at least a couple of the days, sporting these new Handspun socks. I love them. I cannot get over the difference in feel that Handspun yarn in particular brings. Maybe it has something to do with having spent so much time with the fiber itself and the materials, but it just feels so different through my fingers and going across the needles. I'm totally hooked on this. And I also appreciate the fact that a small amount of yarn, less than 100 grams, can result in a very decent sized project, useful outcome. I love that. I'm actually spindle spinning some more yarn now that would probably make some nice sock yarn as well. So thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. As always, I appreciate you spending time with me, and I'll see you again next time.